So China's Xi Jinping, that's the president there, like all of his predecessors, wants Taiwan unified with the mainland. And while he would prefer to do it peacefully, he may be willing to risk war with the United States to achieve his goal, especially if he believes he can win such a war at an acceptable cost. This is very important. Um, Taiwan, just so you understand geography, is a little island. It's not even that small, actually. It's a pretty large island. It's an island nation right off the coast of China. And it is from 1949, Mao Zedong and the revolution there in China. It is uh, it's the safe haven for all the capitalists who left communist China back when there was a war in the 1950s. So Taiwan is really made up of a lot of defectors, I guess you could call them. These are people that did not go along with the communist takeover of China. They were not involved in Red China. They wanted to escape it. And many of them, their family members, I'm talking like recent, like their parents and their grandparents, were literally slaughtered by the communists in China. So to say that they don't get along very well in Taiwan and China would be an understatement, obviously. We're looking at fresh blood still stained, I guess you could say, in that area, in that region of the world. And so Taiwan's not just going to, jump on into the hands of China and the Communist Party. So ultimately, it's going to end up in war. China's trying to do what they did to Hong Kong, if anybody knows about that. Hong Kong it's a city, but essentially it is like a region. It's like a state. You could say it's a state. And it belonged to the British for a while. And that's where there was this British port for years. And then the British made an agreement that, okay, Hong Kong can go back into China's hands after a series of events would happen and unfold. And that's how that happened. Well, China came in and basically turned Hong Kong into a communist place. Hong Kong protesters were everywhere. It was violent. It was violent. And there were people being kidnapped by the Chinese Communist Party. They worked their ass off. Right under Trump's nose, by the way, to take over Hong Kong. And so they've done it in Hong Kong, and if they can do something similar, and what they did with Hong Kong, yes, there was some violence, but ultimately they were able to do it politically. They were able to infiltrate Hong Kong politics, and the Chinese Communist Party essentially took over Hong Kong, at least took over all the power sectors of Hong Kong, right? And so that leaves the Biden administration, I'm reading from the article now, that leaves the Biden administration, which to date has been sending mixed signals to both Russia and China. Administration spokespersons, that's really who's running the White House, it seems like, because Biden doesn't even know who he is or where he's going. The spokespersons have warned of severe consequences should Russia invade Ukraine. But President Biden has stated that those consequences will be primarily economic in the form of sanctions. Well, Russia's been dealing with sanctions from the U.S. for, since the Soviet Union, right? So, to say that Russia can be independent of the United States is also an understatement. I do believe that, again, this is the same bully pulpit that we have in the United States, which is the world reserve currency. Because we have the world reserve currency, we are able to sanction other nations, meaning that we are able to inflict unbelievable economic damage onto a nation because we control the trade of all the goods based on our currency. Because our currency being the world reserve currency, they have to transact in US dollars. So when the United States sanctions a nation like we've done to Iran, this is why Iran is buying up all the Bitcoin, and they are mining Bitcoin in Iran right now as we speak. They love Bitcoin in Iran. They are actually thinking that will be the world reserve currency in some nearby future. And again, as the world does turn around, we are looking at a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin to become the world reserve, something that is divorced from governments and the governments can't use like a weapon system the way the United States has used the US dollar as a weapon system. And so once again, here we are, Biden threatening sanctions on Russia when Russia literally made it a national agenda to grow their own food, be independent of all other nations, have national sovereignty, have pride in their nation. Like the people in Russia, not everybody, but the people in Russia, if you study it long enough, you realize that they are very proud and they are focused on being independent from any other nation. They don't want to rely on, food from other nations. They don't want to rely on energy from other nations. They don't want to rely on any kind of agricultural products from other nations. They don't want to rely on, frankly, anything, especially also military support from any other nations. Russia has developed a large enough military to defend themselves and be a world power. I mean, they have their own nuclear weapons since the 1950s and 1960s during the Cold War. So again, here we are with this idea of sanctions. Meanwhile, President Biden has stated that the United States will defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese attack. But administration spokespersons, once again, people who are mouthpieces for the administration right now, have walked that back. They reaffirmed the U.S. policy of strategic ambiguity. This is a recipe for confusion, misunderstanding, and possibly war on two fronts. So what this article is essentially saying is that the idea of war is based off of really the United States at this point. Their word does not matter. Ultimately, their word doesn't matter. So Biden he's half asleep, half awake, half conscious, unconscious. He might be dead already. He might be a fake human being. Who knows what he is, but clearly he's not running the country. And so when you see the United States as just sort of being run by some debilitated person, and you're getting mixed signals from this like collective group of people who say they represent the United States. The Defense Department says something, but then the State Department says something else, and then the UN ambassador says something else. So like there's just a lot of confusion. There's not a unitarian approach to any policy right now on the worldwide scale. And that's what's most embarrassing about our country right now. They thought that Trump was this big issue because Trump was so they thought of him as spontaneous, rambunctious, random, not controlled, right? Like he could do anything kind of thing. And that's one sort of element of, okay, we don't want that. Some people don't want that, right? While at the same time, at least there was one person in charge. Like ultimately, Trump was in charge. I mean, he did do things that didn't get actually done. Like he said things and he wanted things done and they didn't get done. That is true. So it's not like he was really in control of everything. But the point is like on an international level, people knew that what Trump said is what Trump meant. And he followed that up with action. And he did that multiple times, whether it was sanctions, whether that was trade deals, whether that was missile attacks or anything national security. He pretty much confirmed and did with his word. So, that's interesting, right? This muddled U.S. approach, I'm reading from the article again, was highlighted at the recent summit for democracy, where the U.S. president portrayed international politics as a global struggle between democracies and autocracies and characterized the United States as democracy's champion. Biden and other American democracy proponents appear to have forgotten the wise counsel of Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, that America was the well-wisher of freedom to all but champion only of her own. Of course, we love the Founding Fathers. We want to refer back to that. The U.S. democracy proponents have likewise forgotten the prudent diplomacy of Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger that sought America's geopolitical benefit to exploit the divisions and fissures between the two most powerful autocracies and the Eurasian landmass. This was during the Soviet Union, during the whole Cold War era, afterward, but still very important to realize that what is America's benefit? Look, people can complain about, America and all this stuff. At the end of the day, if you're running a country, if you're running a family, if you're running a business, you do want to have that business or that nation in mind when making decisions, just like you have yourself in mind when making decisions. Have you ever entered a business deal or a relationship, a romantic relationship, where you really didn't have your own best interests in mind and you were so giving and selfless that you forgot about who you were, and you got into a business or you got involved in some project and you basically didn't even get anything out of it because you weren't upfront about your shit. You weren't saying, hey, this is what I feel and this is how I'll benefit, yada, yada. That's kind of what the U.S. is doing. We're like aimless. We don't have a lot of strategic, input on the world and international affairs. We're just sort of running in circles and not knowing what the fuck or who the fuck we are. So foreign policy and strategy involve understanding and prioritizing threats and then devoting the necessary resources to meet those threats. That's perfectly said about foreign policy. If you want to rewind, you should rewind and listen to it again. I don't have time to say it. China clearly possesses the greatest threat to U.S. national security interests in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. The Biden administration's focus should be there, and it should allocate resources accordingly. here's the issue. So what this article is saying from this opinion piece, basically, is that the U.S. should focus everything on China. Everything should be focused on China. All the money, all the funding, all the weapon systems, everything that we have from a national security perspective should be focused on the Indo-Pacific region, which is Hawaii, which is this Taiwan area. All of this should be, all of our American manpower should be over there. Now, I mean, not every single last piece, right? We still have military base in Germany and Europe, and we still have that kind of level of commitment there. And here's the thing with NATO. NATO is like a collective of countries. So it's Americans, it's Australians, it's British, it's a whole collective. So, that at least can be handled through them, and that could be limited. I understand that. I think that that's wonderful. And so we should just commit in that level, in that capacity over there in Europe. We shouldn't be overdoing ourselves in Europe, because that compromises ourselves. You know what China wants the most is for us to get involved in Ukraine. That's what China would want the most. So you have Chinese-backed U.S. politicians, Chinese-funded U.S. politicians that would actually advocate for an attack on Russia, just like that Republican did, just like the Democrats are doing. They're all in the same camp. In a sense, they all want to attack Russia. They want to sort of pose this threat on Russia, because Russia, very much like Trump, Putin, is not controlled. He is not under the globalist thumb anymore, just like the Soviet Union. Soviet Union was under the thumb of communism for years.